you will also be getting a certificate for this session. So look out for that email. You won't get this right away after the session. You will get it in the next week, in the following week. Also, the session is being recorded, like I said, so you will have the recording for this session. Okay, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Actually, no, wait, hang on, not yet. I wanna welcome Rachel again. Maybe some of you seen her yesterday for the session that we had for product orientation, but I'm so glad Rachel can make it today, and we're gonna be following up on professional development today. Rachel has over 30 years of experience in English language teaching. She's authored a number of ELT books, and she's done a lot of these Ministry of Education projects as well in the past. So I'm so grateful, and I'm happy to learn from her knowledge as well. Thank you, Rachel, for being here.
Sarish, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy that you're able to join again for this session. This is going to really be quite different from yesterday's session. And yesterday, as the people who were here will know, you were very much the recipients of a lot of information about TopGoal in order to feel prepared and ready to teach the course and to understand the methodology and so forth. Today, we're looking at something to enhance your professional development, for you to think about, to consider, to share your views on as well. We're going to be talking about different learning theories and different approaches to teaching. And what we want to do today, even though there are still a lot of people who are at the session, we want to use polls throughout the session to get your views. Very interesting for us, interesting also for your colleagues, for you to indicate your thoughts or your preferences about a particular learning theory or teaching approach or whatever. So throughout the session as a whole, we've got 7 polls set up, which Sarish and Fatma will be administering. And that gives you an opportunity, in addition to obviously the chat and so forth, that gives you another opportunity to be involved. So without more ado, let me correct my settings so you can see the screen in the right way and we can get started. Okay, so to reiterate, we're looking at evaluating some different learning theories and some teaching approaches today. We're going to be looking critically at what those theories and those approaches are. And also, because I'm very mindful of the fact that for this to be helpful to you, you need some practical application, some practical hints and tips. We will be looking at practical ways for you to integrate those theories into your teaching. So as far as the learning theories are concerned, there are plenty of learning theories out there, as I'm sure you know. We'll be focusing specifically on 4. We're going to be looking at behaviorism learning theory. We're going to be looking at cognitive learning theory, constructivism, and humanism. Those are 4 of the key, most popular learning theories around. I will mention a couple of others, but those 4 are the ones we will go into much more detail on. Then in terms of teaching approaches towards the end of the webinar, we'll be looking at a number actually, 8, I think, different teaching approaches, what those are, how those work, and what you think of them as well. And then we'll be ending up with just some conclusions and points for you to take away. Sarish has already told you that you'll receive the recording of this webinar. You'll also receive this particular PowerPoint deck as a point of reference for you to look at in the future, should you want to. So, without more ado, Sarish, we have the first of our polls. If Sarish is available.
Sorry, I was just setting that up for you.
I had a sudden panic in case nobody had heard a word I'd said for the last couple of minutes.
Okay, I'm getting answers now.
Okay. So it's number 1. What is your preferred teaching style? You use one specific teaching approach or you use a mix of teaching approaches? I have an expectation about how this might go. We don't really want answers to 2 yet. We only want to look at 1 at the moment, but I mean, that's fine. That's so interesting already in the poll. That completely goes against what my expectation was. I thought one of the answers to question 1, I thought one of those answers would really dominate, whereas right now there's not a lot to choose between them. How interesting. Anybody else going to answer, or are we going to leave it at 53-47? Question 1 I'm talking about. Okay. Should we pick it up? Should we stop it there, Suresh?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what have we ended up with? 53-47?
Yes, yes. And I got a high number for the first one. I use one specific teaching approach.
Yes, yes. That's interesting, because I expected that the majority of you would say you used a mix of teaching approaches. So, okay, that's lovely. That's really helpful to know. Thank you so much. All right, then. So let us move on and get started with talking about behaviorism, which possibly will be very familiar to a lot of you. Just need to move my band out of the way so I can see properly from my end. And behaviorism theory is looking at how our students learn based on external forces, basically, based on the environment around them, external factors, and fundamentally rewards. A piece of behavior that happens if they do a specific thing. It's an old theory. You may very well have heard of it in connection with Ivan Pavlov and the animals he worked with, and by giving them food, he elicited certain pieces of behavior without fail. So it was he maintained it was a very strong theory that if we give a reward, we get a specific piece of wanted, desired behavior. And even to the point where if the reward can be seen to be imminent, that behavior will be manifested. So in terms of our children, something that was very popular some years ago now in lots and lots of classrooms, I don't know if it's used as much today, and actually in lots of homes, were things like star charts. So that where children, let's say at home, they were learning to eat their green vegetables or something like that, the reward if they ate their peas or their cabbage would be a gold star on their star charts. And it worked in millions of households. It worked because a visible, tangible reward for a piece of behavior strengthens the likelihood of that piece of behavior again. So if we transfer that to the classroom, we're talking about something we mentioned yesterday, that repetition and that reinforcement, and that kind of feeds into this behaviorist approach. Okay. So if we move on, a couple of examples of ways to use this approach, if you like. So for example, with very young learners, we use vocabulary flashcards. We prepare the flashcards with the picture and the word, and we show the flashcards in class and ask the students to say the word. If they say the word correctly, then they can have a reward, a sticker, a stamp, or whatever. And that's their reinforcements. And that positive reinforcement encourages them to repeat or to be motivated to try to repeat that particular piece of behavior, saying the right word when they see a specific picture. And it increases the likelihood that they'll invest more into that in the future and give correct answers in the future. So that's one very simple way of achieving that kind of pattern of behavior reinforcement in the classroom with young learners. And then the next thing is looking at sentence drills, which is another quite common thing in young learners' classrooms. So if you are trying to get a particular set of vocabulary reinforced with the students, for example, then you might start with a sentence stem like, I like to, and encourage your students to complete the sentence using their own words. So you can give them immediate feedback. They'll give you their answers, their own answers. For example, I like to play, I like to sing, I like to write, I like to read. And you as the teacher are then in a position to reinforce with some sort of reward or praise, or to gently correct them. But either way, that's a kind of behaviorist approach. That drill with immediate feedback for your students helps to reinforce and solidify the correct responses each time. So it's very clear what the correct response is. It's very clear to students that's what was required, and that's what they should be aiming for in the future. So it's undoubtedly a very solid way for our students to learn. This is a little cheat card for you, really, and we'll have one of these at the end of each of these 4 sections about learning theories. So this just tells us who the key people were in the formulation of the theory, in this case, Skinner, Pavlov, who we've mentioned, and John Watson. And then the core concepts, teaching practices, practical application, and evaluation. So the core concepts for behaviorism are learning as a change in observable behavior, and also the fact that we are reinforcing with reward or punishing by not giving positive feedback. That's seen as the sort of punishment, the deprivation of the reward, and that those 2 interactions are what shapes the student's behavior. Teaching practices include, as we saw, drill and practice, and very much based on rewards and incentives. Practically, this is good for foundational skills. It's very good in classrooms where there's some disruption and there's a need for behaviour management. And that's, again, why it was used in some households as well, to get more control around behaviour. It does give the teacher an element of control in the classroom and the ability to manage that control. It's not a particularly great theory in terms of fostering things we talked about yesterday, like creativity and critical thinking. So it's a clear structure. It's easy to see and manage and measure progress. However, that element of external control, it means that it's not such an active learning theory. Okay, so that's the behaviorist theory. Serish, time for another quick poll, just to check something with the audience.
Absolutely. Here we are.
Okay, so have you personally ever used the behaviorist approach in an English lesson?
And the numbers are going up. We have 500 people who have answered. Rachel, you let me know when you want the poll to end. And I
think we give it about, 10 or 15 seconds or something, just for people to take the opportunity to enter their votes.
So check your screens. There's a poll on your screen, and you can select the answer. Have you ever used the behaviorist approach in an English lesson? We have over 1,000 people who have answered.
Super. Okay, then. So where are we with the results on that? I'm not even going to try to predict. Oh, great. Oh, that's what I was expecting for question 1, the other way around. Fantastic. I mean, it would be so, I don't know if we've got time or even an opportunity to allow just one person out of the thousands to give us an example. Do we have a chance to do that, Sarish? Could you select?
Yes, we can. So I'm going to lower hands right now. And if you need to talk and share an example, you need to raise your hand and we can unmute and you can share with everybody in this session. So raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can share an example of how you have used it in an English lesson. Okay, Najwa, I'm going to allow you to talk now. Najwa, excuse me. You can unmute and share your experience.
Najwa, you will need to unmute yourself, otherwise we can't hear you, but it would be great to know how you've used the behaviorist approach in an English lesson.
You can raise your hand if you need to talk. I have another volunteer, Abdullah.
Need to unmute yourself.
Abdullah, can you unmute yourself?
Bottom left of the screen.
Because we can't hear you.
No.
Another volunteer then, Safia. This is going to be
Try
my
one more
last one.
time.
This is going to be my last one.
Yes.
Safia, you can unmute yourself.
Just click the bottom left microphone icon on your screen to unmute yourself and tell us your example.
Her hand's down. Oh, yes, you did it. You
you
did it. Try again.
Sophia, try again. You did do it. So many people waiting.
I know. I'm going to take another one, Rachel, if that's all right. Amal?
Amal, you need to unmute yourself. Bottom left microphone icon. Click on it, please. Shame, because I would really like to hear what people have to say. I can't understand that nobody can unmute themselves or can find the right button.
You're raising your hand, yes.
No.
Okay.
No.
We managed almost for one.
For 1 second. Okay, we'll move on. But it would be really nice if you could, lovely audience people, if you were able to have a look on your screen and see where the audio microphone icon is. It's usually bottom left. Because when Sarish allows it, that will enable you to unmute yourself, I believe, Sarish, and then we'll be able to hear you and you can share your experience, which would be great. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on.
I just want to address some questions that have coming in. So there is no icon. Yes, there is no mic icon right now, but for the people who we move in, we are giving them permission to talk. Right now, obviously, you're all of you guys cannot stop talking together. You know, there are 3,000, 4,000 people. You cannot start talking all together. But if you raise your hand and, you know, then we pick you and put you on this side where you can talk, where all the talking is, you are allowed to talk. So it's so much so that you need to raise your hand, then we can unmute and you can talk. So it does work, but I will need you, so you can see as an example. I can move people, but when we move them, you can see the mic. You'll have to unmute. That's allowing you to talk. Never mind, just something for you guys to know.
Okay. Did you want to take a question, Sarish? Did you want me to?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm asking you if you want.
Yes, we can go ahead.
Just carry on.
Carry on. I'm going to show an example.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So next learning theory, and there will be a poll at the end of this little section as well for you to respond to. The next one is about cognitivism. So here, this, as the name suggests, you won't be surprised to know, this is very much based on how people think. So this theory acknowledges the fact that our students are influenced both by internal and external elements. And the very famous Piaget, who did so much in the field of cognitive psychology based on mental processes, he was instrumental in developing this theory and looking at how the world around a child, as well as the internal structures, their cognitive level of ability, their cognitive development, how those two things impact learning. So at the very basic level, what this theory is saying is that our internal thoughts and the external processes around us both interact in a way that's specific and individual to us to form and develop our learning. So as learners understand how their own thinking can impact their learning and their success in a learning environment, as well as their behavior, in time, they're able to take control over it. And as you can understand from everything I've said so far, this is a theory that requires a certain level of cognitive maturity before they can do that, before students can actually recognize what's happening and then have the maturity to be able to interact with that in a way where they're influencing and controlling the process to a certain extent. Okay, as far as we as teachers are concerned, the more we give our students opportunities by asking them questions, by encouraging them to think out loud, and that's a really important point sometimes for our students. When they're trying to thinking back to yesterday, for those of you who were here, we talked about inductive grammar, and we talked about students working out a grammar rule. Now, a very helpful technique to guide and support your students in that scenario is to ask them to vocalize their thinking process. So they might struggle a little bit when they're sort of 6 or 7, but with your help, they may be able to do it. And that not only helps them to clarify their thinking, it helps you as their teacher to understand where they're at and how you can help them or guide them if they're a little bit stuck. So those strategies that help to support the student's process are important things for teachers to be able to interact with and to give guidance on. Okay, so moving on to some examples. First example is graphic organizers, which is certainly something that we use in English language teaching a lot. This particular example is suggesting we use a graphic organizer to map out, to ask our students to map out a story so that they can see it in that visual way. The story that's talked about in this example is Goldilocks and the Three Bears, a very popular, simple, old English story. And what will happen is that we'll need to have a graphic organizer chart with the various sections relating to stories. So the character, the setting, the problem, the solution. Then you as a teacher would be reading the story with the learners as they filled in the various sections in the graphic organizer. So they're going to be putting the characters, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They're going to be putting the setting as the bear's house in the forest, the problem that Goldilocks enters the house, uses their belongings, eats their porridge, whatever. And then the solution, when the bears come home and they find Goldilocks and she runs away. So it's the fact that these graphic organizers allow students to see a visual representation of a text, and allows the students as well to organize the information. So all of that very much feeds into this cognitive approach where their thought processes are playing such a significant role in the consolidation of their learning. Okay, so that's one example. And then again, a very popular technique for all of us in ELTs, think, pair, share. And it's the same kind of thing. You ask the student, for example, a question about what they do in the morning. Your aim is to teach or reinforce some vocabulary related to routines, common everyday routines. So they think about their answers individually, first of all. So that's the thinking part. Then they get together with a partner, that's the pairing part, and then they both share. So they articulate, they verbalize what their thoughts are, share their routines. So those think, pair, share activities help our students to self-reflect and to think about the language rather than just giving automatic responses all the time, thinking about the language in relation to themselves, which is something else we talked about yesterday in terms of personalization. So it's not just about understanding the vocabulary, it's about using it appropriately in the right context and applying it to themselves. So again, it's a strategy that will ensure a deeper learning and a deeper retention in terms of English language specifically. And here's the cheat card on that particular theory. So we talked about Piaget and Bruner. And the two key concepts are that learning as a process of acquiring and organizing knowledge. So it's much deeper interaction with the knowledge, and much of an emphasis is on the mental processes. For teachers, scaffolding and support, the use of schemas and systems and processes, and encouraging problem solving are all ways you as teachers can kind of apply this and help the students to learn this as an approach to their learning. It's obviously useful for developing things like higher order thinking skills, critical thinking, and so forth. There's no doubt that it supports retention. It's good in terms of strengths that it focuses on the students' individual internal processes and that they get that deep learning results. It's not so good if you think back to behaviorism. It's not so effective for a behavior change. It doesn't work in the same way as behaviorism does. So that's cognitivism. And Sarish, you won't be surprised to know there's another short poll.
Give me a second, please.
Sure, absolutely, no rush.
And there you are.
So the question here is, do you believe that the cognitive approach is useful for teaching young learners? Let's give 10, 15 seconds or so, shall we? Are people answering, Sarish?
Yes, I get about 1,000.
Great. I've got no idea. Well, let me just think. Where would I think?
1,000 people have answered.
I might think it's fairly split, but I haven't been right.
Oh, you would be surprised.
Well, again, that's why this is so really very, very interesting from my point of view, because sometimes we have certain expectations or preconceptions about how colleagues might teach, and it's a very good reality check when we speak to colleagues and find out that's not necessarily the case.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. We have about 1,400 people who have answered and sharing the results on your screen.
Excellent. Excellent. Oh, I find that very encouraging, actually. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Because it requires more effort sometimes on the part of the teachers, and sometimes less confident teachers might not be so willing to use the constructive vision theory, the cognitive theory. So that's great. That's really good. Sarish, dare we try a question?
I'm not sure about that now. I was just checking.
Yeah. No. Okay. All right. So we'll move on. Close that. Go to. So the next third of the theories, we've had behaviorism, we've looked at cognitivism. This theory is constructivism. Okay. So this is, I find very interesting, because what we're talking about here is our students creating their own reality, creating their own learning based on their previous experiences. So it's kind of left with our learners. It's down to them how they internalize things and add to their knowledge and build up their knowledge. So our students are the recipients of what we teach them, but this theory is a much more active theory, which again I feel is a good thing, because anything where learners are actively engaging with a topic, with a subject, with content, is inevitably going to be more effective and going to end in better results in terms of retention and the ability to transpose that information to other contexts and other scenarios. But each time the result is individual and specific to the student. So we as teachers can use constructivism to help understand that all learners will bring themselves, their individuality, and their own set of previous experiences to the classroom, and that will consequently affect how they learn, if you believe this is the only main theory, and how they will construct their reality, how they will internalize what you're telling them, how they'll add it to their previous knowledge, and how they'll move on and develop from there. So learners are quite active in this process. Teachers are more of a guide, a facilitator, gently correcting, steering the way things go within the classroom. But teachers can also help learners create their own process if the learners want that. Learners, if they're able to verbalize how they're getting on with their learning, or if there's something they're struggling with, then obviously the teacher's there for support and to give explanations. So teachers do have a significant role, is what I'm saying. So a couple of examples, as we looked at before, just try and move on. The first one is a nice idea about creating a class storybook. And the immediate significance of this is that it reiterates the fact this class group of students are joined as a community by the fact they're all in a class, but within that class are all individual students who will learn individually in their own way. And again, we talked about this yesterday in terms of how diverse a class group is, and how diversity in terms of learning styles and learning abilities is something we have to take into account. So we would, as teachers, introduce the idea of the storybook and explain that every student would create their own contribution. And each student can then make a page with maybe a picture, photo, drawing, and a few sentences. So they, as learners, students, will then brainstorm. They'll think about their ideas, and they can do that together. They can be sharing their thoughts and ideas as a class group. They can be discussing the ideas they've got for the characters in their story and the plot and so forth. They then create individually their own page, their own picture, their own writing for their story. And then you, as teacher, collate everything, put the books together, and that's a class. It's the class's property, if you like, and the class reads the stories together. The whole idea, and we know this, is that project-based learning, something like this, gets the students to engage, but also collaborate in a creative process. And that collaboration is another really important aspect in terms of learning, and also in terms of providing some of the 21st century skills that we touched on yesterday, that we constantly refer to in ELT because they are so critical for the future of our students. So we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about engagement, we're talking about creativity, and we're talking about learners all sharing their own understanding, their own conception of a story. So they contribute to this shared project, and that gives them all the good feelings about the collaboration, about participation, and about how individual efforts can all come together in something that really has meaning and value. So all in all, a very positive thing. And then we'll just look at another idea, which is to set up a class restaurant. We talked yesterday when we were talking about young learners, about how they like to act out and play games and mime and so forth. So these role-playing type activities have a place in the classroom as well. And in this kind of theory, when we're talking about constructivism, this is how role play can be used. So we could, for example, set up a mock restaurant and have menus, have roll cards to say who was going to be what, maybe have some pretend money or whatever. The students have their roles, whether they're the waiter or whether they're a customer or whether they're the person who's cooked the food. and they are going to be practicing the phrases and the vocabulary they've learned for this particular context. So it's an opportunity for that reinforcement of vocabulary at the same time, and functional language like asking for the bill, ordering your food from the menu, and so forth.
We got a nice comment based on that by Hanan. She says, he says, we used it last year to let students speak about their holiday. And when I asked them about the good and the bad things that happened to them last year.
Oh, nice. Perfect. Perfect, because that ticks so many boxes about the student thinking back and putting all those ideas and thoughts into words in a different language. If we're talking about English language teaching, it also gives the opportunity for personalization, because the students can give their personal experiences. It gives an opportunity for sharing, for engagement, for discussion. So yes, lovely. Lovely. It's exactly the way to do it, and a really good idea to do something that the other students can relate to, because many of them will then have an experience they might feel brave enough to share. So yeah, great. Really nice. Really nice. So Rich, do that. If you see questions, don't hesitate to interrupt.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Okay, so we're talking about role play, and the learners can really lose themselves in this. Remember one thing I want to say, and I said it many times yesterday: as long as they feel safe, as long as you've created that safe learning environment where learners can make mistakes, do things they feel a little bit nervous about, not worry about being embarrassed, not worry about being criticized, then something like this, or something like the example about sharing information about their holidays, are perfect and really valuable learning tools. So they're immersed in the experience. They're going to be using this new language they're learning in the right context. They're going to be using functional words for a specific purpose. It's experiential. And we'll talk about this in relation to teaching approaches at the end as well. And they're practicing communication, but it's also about problem solving. It's about social interaction and so forth. So it ticks a lot of boxes. It covers a lot of things. So here again with the cheat sheet, we're talking about Piaget and Vygotsky. And the two key concepts here are that knowledge is constructed through interaction with the environment, with what's going on around the student and how they process it and take that in and add it to their prior knowledge. The emphasis is on active learning, which is a key thing about constructivism, and on social interaction. So teaching practices that are based on problem solving, that allow for collaboration, and that incorporate as many hands-on activities as possible are really key to this approach. And those sorts of teaching practices will yield very good results. It's very good, as you will have gathered, at developing things like critical thinking and problem solving skills. And it definitely also encourages learners, students, to be more independent, which is a big plus. So this will promote engagement. This will, like some of the others, result in deeper understanding. But it can be quite resource intensive if you're always thinking of ways to set up role plays or ways to develop collaborative projects. That's a lot. It takes a lot of preparation and a lot of planning. But also it's quite challenging. It's challenging in terms of time. And I think sometimes, again, for newer teachers, it seems quite a daunting prospect. So that will put some people off. The question is whether it's put you off. So there's a poll question here. Sirish, I'm trying to remember what this question is. Oh, yes.
It's on the screen now?
Yes, it is. Would you ever present an entire English lesson based on constructive learning theory?
Interesting.
So it's another yes or no one.
And while we get the poll running, we got a comment from Wasim. He says, I usually talk to them and ask them about their favorite movies and why they like them.
Yes, and that gives heaps of opportunities for language use, because whatever the movie is, they might need language to describe it. They might be able to tell you where they saw the movie, or did they go with other people, or who did they watch it with? And then they can tell you about actually the actions, the plot, the story. So language, tenses, all kinds of things. But that would be right on the nail. Yes. Yeah. Great.
Anybody willing to share their experience, Rachel?
Well, we can try. We can
I
try.
can try. So I understand you guys cannot unmute themselves, but that's how you are set up. So a lot of questions coming in of I cannot see the mic. Yes, you cannot see the mic because you cannot unmute. But the good news is we can unmute you. You need to raise your hand. So if you raise your hand, we can move you over to the side where you can talk. So we can do that, but I need you to raise your hand for me, if that's all right. If you're willing to speak, absolutely all right if you don't want to. So if I see any hands up, this is a class. If your hand is up, means you need to talk. And I see a lot of hands going down now. So raise your hand if you'd like to contribute, and we can get you talking.
We would love to hear some of you share your experiences. So be brave and raise your hand, and Sarish will work her mechanics in the background and enable you to share your view, your opinion. So go to Fatima.
Oh, great. Fatma has unmuted. You just did it.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone.
Salam. Thank you, Fatma. I'm so glad you're here.
Welcome.
Yeah,
the vocal
I
world.
figure out why they didn't know how to unmute, because it gave us the option to join as a webinar, I think, and a dentist. So that's what it's confusing.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Rachel. Hi.
Hello, hello. Lovely to hear from you. Do you have some experience you can share with us?
Yes, I'm an English teacher. This is my third year on teaching young learners. I use about the last theory, constructive. I use this on the lesson of families. When I want them to talk about the families. If they have any brothers in the school, I bring them. So who's this? Who's sister? Like this, and we make a big family.
That's so nice. That's such a lovely thing to do. And you know what I really love about that is that you spot whether there might be an opportunity to make that environment for the new student even safer by bringing big brother.
Yes.
That's just lovely. Yes. But also it's something, it's one of the things closest, in the circles around our students. It's one of the closest circles. And so one of the things they're most likely to be able to say something about. It's really nice. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Please, if you allow me, please.
Yes.
After we finish, please, can you explain in details the lesson of the super integrated lessons?
Lessons, super integrated.
Yes. We need more details, please.
Mm-hmm. And when you say super integrated, you mean using different approaches?
In the book. I mean in the book.
Okay, and the book. Okay.
With glue.
If we don't get time, we may not, then I can get your email address, or you can send it to me.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Sarish can send you mine, and we'll follow this up there for sure. If we don't get them here. Super. Okay. Great. Okay, thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sarish, I'll move on.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, all right. So this is the fourth and the last of the learning theories. And this one is the humanist theory, whatever you like to call it. Quite close to constructivism, but it's based on the idea of what's commonly called self-actualization. You will know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I bet everybody in this room, let's call it a room, knows about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So self-actualization is at the top of that hierarchy of needs. And it's the stage where the exceptional stage, it's fair to say, where we believe that all our needs are met and we are therefore the best version of ourselves. So there we are. That's what we're all working our way up the hierarchy of needs to achieve. Where we're striving for this and moving through different learning environments can either help us to move further towards that self-actualization, perfection position, or away from it. So teachers have a big role to play in that when we're talking about the environment of the classroom and helping learners get closer to their self-actualization. And teachers can help the students' emotional and physical needs by, surprise, surprise, giving them a safe and comfortable place to learn. So making sure that that physical environment around them is ideal for learning, isn't too noisy, isn't too cold, isn't too cluttered, etc., etc. And the emotional environment within that classroom, so the students feel safe to talk, feel non-threatened, feel able to be brave, basically. Okay, so that's the sort of environment that's most conducive to helping learners learn, students learn. And the point is that if that environment is created, then the students will do the best they can. They'll achieve success. And we've set the scenario to enable them to do that. That's what the humanist theory expects of teachers. So moving on to a couple of examples for that. Show and tell. When we use think, share, pair a lot, and we use show and tell a lot. And I've seen this happen in quite a lot of classrooms where teachers specifically set time aside for show and tell sessions. And then students can bring any item really, but usually it's something from home that has a specific or special meaning to them for whatever reason, and they share it with the class. They are going to be talking about something that might be quite emotional for them. It might be something from Granny who's no longer with us, for example, or whatever. That's why for something like show and tell, where there is a real bearing of the soul, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but you know, students are letting people into their world. That's why the classroom must be really safe and really comfortable. But then the students will take their turns in showing their item and talking about it. They'll be using English. Other children in the class can ask questions. It can be a very lovely, constructive, collaborative, reinforcing process. And you as teachers will still have a chance to give the appropriate vocabulary, maybe give some prompts or whatever. So a really solid learning experience takes place around it. You also will be ensuring that everybody gets a chance to join in. So obviously these sessions are good in supporting that conducive, safe classroom environment where learners feel respected and valued, and those are key words. The activity promotes self-expression, which is essentially what we want when we're teaching English. We want not just for our students to be able to do the exercises in their workbooks and their student books and so forth. We want them to be able to use English as a tool for self-expression. And we know once that happens, we are really achieving success with them, and they're achieving success in terms of their competency with the language. It also can boost self-esteem and self-confidence because students are talking in front of each other. They're safe to do that. People are listening. There's interaction. Those are really positive feelings that reinforce the students as part of the English learning classroom, and that's a positive thing. And also listening skills in terms of the other children who are listening while the show and tell is taking place. They're learning how to listen because there's an expectation they will ask relevant questions. And they're also learning to appreciate their peers and maybe even later down the line give a bit of peer feedback. And that's going to be the basis for your 16-year-old student who works with a classmate and does peer review on pieces of writing, giving constructive feedback, and then editing their own work and giving more constructive feedback and so on. So something like this establishes a lot of baselines in English language teaching and adds a lot of value. Okay, so the next one is about learning stations, something else I've seen done actually in lots of classrooms, where you as a teacher, in conjunction with the students' opinions, if you so wish, arrange the classroom in such a way that there are specific areas dedicated to specific aspects of education. So there might be a story corner, a reading corner, there might be a writing table, there might be somewhere to play games, whether they're vocabulary games, grammar games, or whatever. You'll have likely an arts and crafts station, but it'll be related. All of these will in some way be related to the course you're using, where you are in the curriculum, and so forth. But learners can be free to choose which stations they want to visit and how long they want to spend at each one. That's a very bold statement, and it would need a very bold teacher to be able to implement that and allow that degree of freedom. Most always, I think, where I've seen this, I have seen allocated time to go around to one of the stations, one of the specific areas. And at that point, the students are given their choice. Okay, you can take 15 minutes now, go to whichever classroom area you want to, and do what you'd like to do in that area. I've seen it at that level. I've never just seen a teacher say, right, go where you want and spend however long you want there. Nevertheless, whilst the students are there, there's plenty for them to do. There's plenty of opportunities for them to talk to their classmates and to use language. And there's opportunity for teachers to go round, to encourage, to support, to practice language and so forth. So the fundamental basic principle under this is that of self-directed learning. And it does, which is a very nice thing, empower the learners to take an element of control over their own learning. That gives them some autonomy. It helps them also understand things like personal responsibility and things like that, linking with what we talked about yesterday when we talked about SEL, social and emotional learning features. So again, you can see how these elements kind of underpin the main theories. But it definitely also gives motivation, and it makes the learning environments interesting and fun. So there are many, many things about an approach like this that will really spark enthusiasm in the learner. It is just something sometimes you have to be quite bold to implement as a teacher, I would say. So Carl Rogers, quite a famous 20th century psychologist, and Maslow with his hierarchy of needs, were key people in the establishment of the development of this theory. One of the core concepts is that learning is a personal act of fulfilled potential to get to that peak of self-actualization. And the emphasis is on self-actualization and personal growth. It's very much a learning-centered approach. And the teacher's role is more about facilitation and enablement rather than actual direct instruction and control. Done properly, the classroom will be a lovely, nurturing, supportive environment within which to learn, with plenty of self-directed learning. So it ticks the social and emotional and psychological needs for sure. Researchers argue it also promotes lifelong learning, and that if that's true, then that's a massive plus. The weakness is it's less structured. Indeed it is, and difficult to measure the outcomes, I guess, because different students have done different things, they've gone in different directions. So how do you establish that kind of standardization in terms of assessment? It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. And so a poll, Serish.
Yes, sure. Let's do a poll. So it's on the screen now.
It is. do you feel the humanist approach is valuable for English teachers? Now, I do think I know how this one might go, but I haven't done well so far, so let's see.
Again, it's on your screen. Do you feel the humanist approach is valuable for English teachers? Yes or no? The numbers are going up. You have about 20 seconds, I would say. It's on your screen. And I think we'll wait for at least to get 1,000 and more.
Yeah.
Okay, I've crossed 1,000. The answer is very evident. I'm going to give it a stop now and share the results.
I'm hoping it's what I'm. Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, I'm really happy about that, obviously, because there are so many aspects of that approach that are commendable, that are good practice, that are so that make it a great experience for the learners. So that, yeah, good. I think I might have had to go home, or I am home, but I think I might have had to leave if it had been the other way around. I'd have been very, very sad. That's Anybody want to share anything, Sarish? Should we give it a go? We'll be all right, I think.
Yeah, we can. I mean, if you're okay with time, we can. And because I know Fatma did mention that it was a bit tricky for people to figure that out. I can try.
Try with my show.
Michelle, you're unmuted already. Hopefully you can talk.
Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, you're muted. You figured it out, Michelle. You were unmute for like a few seconds.
I think it may just be too hard for people.
Yeah, it's a bit.
Maybe pick one more person if it doesn't work.
Miriam, you made it. You unmuted yourself. You want to say something?
She will allow me, please.
Yes.
I will say it in Arabic so my colleagues can understand. It's okay.
Are you able to say it in English so I could understand?
I'll just explain how to join.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yes, please,
Yeah,
Mariam, please.
Okay, thank you. أهلا جميعا. إذا سمحت لكم أو بالدخول اختاروا الانضمام كمدير أو ويب بنير هذه. وبعدها خلاص يطلع لكم انميوت. شيلوا الانميوت وتقدرون تتكلمون. هذه الطريقة وشكرا. I finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finished. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I thought you were going to ask a question. I didn't realize you were explaining the procedure.
I thought you were going to share.
Me too. Let's see. We'll give one more go, Sarish, after Fatma's really helpful explanation. See if it's worked with somebody maybe who's. What about Mariam?
She's the one who just spoke with us.
Oh, I thought that was Fatma. Sorry, right on. Do you want to pick somebody, Sarish, and see, or?
I can. I'm putting people in as I can see hands up. Amal, Wadha. So you can unmute.
Too quiet.
Hello?
Hey!
Yep.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. I have a question. I think this approach, humanism, do you think that students are eager to be exposure to a new knowledge? Do you think that they feel how good is for them? How good is it to get new knowledge?
Do I think they feel that? What I believe very strongly is it is our duty as teachers to make sure they do feel that way. If I had, when I used to teach, and I taught very young children, I taught preschool children to 70-year-old students. But with the little ones, I would really make sure that we had fun and that it was an exciting experience. I mean, I personally am excited by learning. I am a lifelong learner, and I'm stimulated and I'm motivated by learning. And I think it's our job as teachers to share that with students and help them to get that perspective. It's down to us. If we're bored, if we're predictable, if lessons are monotonous, how will our students have that joy in learning? That would be my question. I feel we help them to get that.
You are right, but I think it's suitable for bigger students, not for younger ones.
But I'm not saying any of these are better or worse for young learners, although some of the humanist approaches can be used for young learners with guidance, for sure.
Yeah, they need guidance. That's what I mean. They need guidance.
But don't forget, young learners are the learners who come to us who already have the most enthusiasm about learning, because nobody's spoiled it for them. They haven't had bad teachers, bad lessons. They haven't been criticized. They are eager to learn. And what unfortunately happens, and if you watch any of Sir Ken Robinson's videos on YouTube, what unfortunately happens is sometimes in some scenarios, that enthusiasm and that excitement that our students begin with gets destroyed, gets squashed as they go through an education system. And that's very sad. That's where I am. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank
you. Thank you for the question. I think we have to move on, Suresh, okay?
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Yeah.
We have to move on, I think, if that's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great question. Okay, so very, very briefly, there are just 3 more less well-known learning theories that I would like us to touch on momentarily. Transformative learning theory, this is good for much older students, and it focuses on the idea that the student can actually change their thinking based on new information. It's really when students are quite confident in their knowledge, but they can adjust that or refine that according to further information in their lifelong learning journey, if you like. Social learning theory is more for quite disrupted classrooms, and it's based on the theory of learning by watching others or not, behaving or not, as the classmates who behave appropriately behave. So it's watching how people request things, how people share things, and so on, and learning by that. That has to be quite guided by teachers for it to be successful. It doesn't always just happen by accident. It needs setting up and constructive. And experiential learning theory is again an extension. It's just learning by doing. So there. So those are the last 3 learning theories. Before we move on to teaching practices for the last half hour, I have the last poll about learning theory. So just a very quick one, Suresh, for people. And I think there's 4 options in this poll, not just 2.
Correct.
Yes. So the question is, which of the 4 main theories of learning do you personally, as a teacher, value the most? Behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, or humanism? Which do you value the most?
And I think now that we have learned more about each of these, we can pick and choose which one do we value the most.
Have to pick one.
Yes. You can.
I don't know.
You have your favorite, Rachel.
I'm a bit eclectic. I collect bits of different theories and put them together. But if I had to choose one, yes, I have my favorite. If I have to choose one, yeah.
Okay. Going to give you more time for this one. We haven't crossed 1,000, and there you go. We've crossed 1,000, so maybe 15 more seconds. Which of the 4 main theories of learning do you value the most? There is no right or wrong answer here. Let us know on the poll. Okay, I am going to end now the poll so we can see the results.
Yes, please.
And here you go.
Oh, how interesting. How interesting. Okay, great. That again, are we keeping these results? Are we able to keep them, or do they just get lost, Sarish?
I can save them, yes.
If we could say that, it'd be nice, I think, to share them. I'd actually like a copy of them as well. I find it very, very interesting. And this is such a big group to get opinions from. It's so useful for us. So that's great. Thank you. So not a lot to choose between them. Behaviorism and cognitive.
Yes, had we probably stayed on a bit longer, they would be the same.
Yeah, very, very interesting, but not massive differences. Super. All right, then. So I'm going to move on to teaching approaches for the last part of this session. And we're going to look at 8 different approaches with just one slide on each one. So, and I think we have a poll at the end of this section, just a quick one to pick up on what your views are about these 8 approaches. So differentiated instruction. Think back to the times we mentioned personalization yesterday, and we touched on it again earlier. So differentiated instruction is exactly what the name suggests. It's teaching based on the idea of creating individually tailored plans for every separate student based on their needs, given that they've all got slightly different or sometimes vastly different needs. So this might involve giving students different activities. It might involve them having access to different content. It might involve you using different assessment techniques. And in extreme examples of personalization for students, it does involve changing the physical setup of the classroom. And in extreme examples, students will be involved on exactly the format and the shape that setup takes. So that it's obviously on a sliding scale, on a spectrum in terms of how much personalization, but at one extreme end, you know, it's really down to students as individuals to say what they want, what they need, how everything should be. This requires us as teachers to really change our style according to the needs of individual learners. It is highly relevant when we're teaching groups of children who have challenging needs, special education needs, to make sure they get the most out of the situation. So if we wanted to differentiate instruction, these are some ways that we could achieve that. Make sure that there's reading content and materials available at different levels. Create special individualized spelling lists for students according to their spelling skills and levels of ability. Have small groups within the class group that are giving tailored advice, bespoke advice to specific learners. Have one-to-one after-school clubs and opportunities where learners can be helped to deal with specific challenges. Talk about learner progress and at-home strategies that parents can do so that they're involved as well. And change the way you assess, change the way you measure progress. So projects, portfolio work, and so forth, even active speaking tasks and things like this can feed into the assessment, because you've got a range of learners with different abilities and you need to make sure that none of them are neglected. So that, I believe, is a very tough call for teachers. And we all try to personalize in a class group, and we all know how difficult it is if we have a class of 30 students, how hard it is to hand on heart say we're offering personalized education. So that's differentiated instruction theoretically anyway. Okay, so the next type of instruction is lecture-based instruction, far more traditional, far more what used to happen back in the old days. Learners are the recipients of information. They are not especially active in the shaping of the lesson or different participation methods in the lesson. They watch and they listen and they take notes. So my question then, of course, would be, well, how How engaging is it? How much retention will there be? How do we know until we come to assess the learners? Because what evidence is there? We can't see inside their brains to see what they're taking in, what they're processing, and what they're retaining. So I feel this is, and probably I was taught this way when I was a young learner, taught at least in my curriculum subjects. But I don't think it's a particularly helpful way for young learners to learn. I don't think it's constructive. I don't think by any means that this kind of approach gets the best out of our students, or maybe more importantly, gives the best to our students from us. But here are some ways to try and make this lecture-based instruction approach more successful. Keep lessons brief to allow for those short attention spans that we talked about again yesterday. Young minds are active and busy and looking for something new and wanting stimulation. So a 45-minute lecture is just after the first 5 minutes will become almost meaningless unless there is that variety, change of pace, all the things we talked about yesterday as good practice principles for teaching young learners. Allow time for questions so that you can at least, as a teacher, do a pulse check on understanding, comprehension, and so forth. Create instructional videos that learners can watch at home. So it's that's the kind of flipped classroom approach, and then they bring something back into the classroom. That's if you're forced into situations where lecture-based instruction is the basis of a lot of the lessons, this is one way to make sure there's a more dynamic lesson in the classroom. And it's also a way to make sure that learners are, to an extent, more actively involved because they've autonomously looked at something before the lesson. They've had to interact in some way with a video, and they may have only received it, but perhaps if they've gone home with a few questions about it, they'll have to do some interaction and some engagement with it. Again, we said this yesterday, but use lots of visual cues, images and videos and icons to maintain interest. Young learners particularly are very stimulated by colour and imagery, so we capitalise on that as teachers. That's why we have bright, colourful young learners classrooms, for example. Promote handwritten notes. Encourage the students to at least take notes, not when they're really young learners, but as they're a little bit older. If you're going to do that, my only proviso would be teach them how to take notes, so they're not trying to write down everything you say and it makes no sense to them when they read it back because they haven't obviously been able to write down everything you said. So I do think taking notes can be useful, but only if the students are first taught how to take notes effectively, so they can then be helpful for them in the future, as well as supporting writing development. Okay, so that's lecture-based instruction. Technology-based instruction is, as you would expect, using technology as a basis in the classroom to support learning, to support teaching. So we're talking about devices, tablets, and so forth, that can be used in the classroom instead of books. I mean, there's a lot of debate around about digital-only courses, and I think I can understand why there's debate around about it. I think in reality, it's not likely to happen in ELT, in English language teaching, for some considerable time yet. But there is a definite, at the same time, a definite expectation for digital resources to be available for English language teaching. And part of the reason for that is that for many children, that's an environment, that interface, looking at a screen, working with a screen, is what they are absolutely comfortable with, familiar with. They're digital natives. They know how to manipulate, gain information. They relate to that kind of interaction. So anyway, can be, again, useful for students who have got special needs and challenging needs and who might have a difficulty, maybe some Neurodiverse children who may have difficulty focusing in a physical classroom may well do better using technology as their mode for instruction. And so as teachers, if we can facilitate that and support that in constructive ways, then that's a good thing. So as far as what we could do, as far as what teachers can do, if we ensure that the students have the right devices and the right technology available, then we can create the environment within which they can learn in this way. We have to build in regular checks to make sure the devices are being used correctly and that they are gaining understanding and learning rather than just everything's washing over them. Again, it's that point with any of these methods, any of these different teaching approaches, there needs to be clear points of assessment and clear methods of assessment so that we do our duty as teachers and check frequently how much progress our students are making, where they're at, and we can identify early on any need for remediation. And we can't, well, I would say we should be using face-to-face learning techniques as well. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It probably shouldn't be one or the other. The two things go together hand in hand in a classroom and a learning environment in the same way as they do in everyday life. It's our reality. We're in the 21st century. Technology is not going to go away. AI's knocking on the door. So we have to accept that's the reality for many, many people. How can we best capitalize on that as teachers and help our students utilize that reality to learn? So there we go. So that's technology-based instruction. The fourth one is group instruction, which is where learners are put into groups to kind of help each other learn. And we touched on this yesterday when we talked about different patterns of interaction, teacher-student, student-student, students-students, and so forth. And we talked about how students can sometimes become the teacher and help their peers to learn because they might explain something in a way that's more age appropriate. And maybe we miss the mark, but they can say it in a way that makes sense to their classmates. So things like class participation, the development of listening skills, the use of learners' own ability to explain and reiterate, represent knowledge, all of those are possible in this scenario. And it's useful and it does work. It needs controlling, but it definitely does work. So in terms of us using that in the classroom, we would be talking about mixing small groups and large groups and also mixing the group members to make sure that that doesn't just stay the same the whole time. The groups need to be still given that safety to make mistakes and to explore ideas. And that can be a very constructive process so that they then gain in confidence and would then be able to share their experiences and experiment with the language more widely. And it has to be done, this sort of instruction, in that culture of the groups being valuable, not just, another way to play, for example. It's a valuable educational experience. So that's group instruction. And then individual instruction is also where we as teachers give the individual student that opportunity so that they can work independently. And we're talking about things like journal entries, diary entries, which can be very useful. And then going back to the learning theories, it gives students their chance to process their thoughts, think about the language, then create their own reality and express that using the English language. Can be very useful in order for students to prepare for a class discussion so they feel more ready, more confident to join in a class discussion. Students less confident who can't necessarily confidently talk in class can still contribute by giving written work for assessment and so forth. So it doesn't exclude those students. Things the teacher can do are, again, create the right learning environment, that safe learning environment, absolutely categorically make sure that any errors, any mistakes are handled in the right way, so we don't damage anybody who's trying to overcome their shyness or is nervous about making a mistake. Allow plenty of time for individuals to think and to plan what they're going to say. Give them time to actually go through those processes, and find ways within that educational setting where you can give some support to the less confident learners. Okay, so that's individual instruction. Inquiry-based instruction very much obviously promotes the idea of learning by investigation. So this is like the learning by discovery, and this is where learners complete projects, assignments, do research and so forth, and find the answers themselves. I love this type of learning because I suppose it feeds into that whole joy of learning that I talked about previously. When learners go on a journey and find answers and discover new information themselves, that has more meaning for them. They've kind of made a conquest in a way, if you like. So teachers are resources, but the goal is for the learner to solve the problem, to make that discovery, and then to be able to explain, to say what they've done in their own words. So they're very much active participants in this process, but the process can go at their individual pace. So it's something I like a lot. As teachers, we can create the time and the space, if possible, for this type of learning to take place. Accept answers that learners give us and accept what they say. It doesn't matter at the time if it's not necessarily always right. If you're looking at the secondary language level, you can address that in other aspects of the education. But make sure everybody feels supported. But for us, really, it's about standing back and letting learners discover things for themselves. And actually, sometimes teachers find that a bit hard, but for learners, it's a great experience. Kinesthetic instruction, which is really particularly relevant for young learners, learning through the use of movement. What it does for young learners is change that pace, which we talked about, give them a chance to get rid of some pent-up energy. It's fun for them. So there are lots of ways that we should think about using this in young learners' classrooms, even if it's simple things, even if they simply stand by their desk and make the shape of different letters or make the shape of a tree, anything, simple things. But those physical activities give opportunities for the young learners to be creative, but it also means we kind of can reset the pace of the lesson. And if they're using words while they're doing it, then they're learning too, which is absolutely fine. So things we can do to support that, things like including drawing and painting and craft activities, using role play and act out opportunities, and including any creative activities, projects, games, and so forth. So then the last one, the 8th one, is experiential instruction, where our students are learning through participating in specific experiences. And the examples here cited are things like projects or case studies, experiments, research, and field trips. So experiences that the student takes part in and learns from. They process the learning. It's a bit of there's the discovery element involved as well. And it's reinforcing that connection between the learner and the real world, but the actual platform, the vehicle is, in our case, the English language. So it generates a lot of enthusiasm, usually, this kind of instruction. And things we can do as teachers are to actively look for opportunities for students to be able to have these experiences, to participate in these experiences. When it's happened, our role is to encourage the students to reflect on that, think about that, process their thinking, and then tell us how they thought, reflect, that process of self-reflection, and they get them to verbalize, explain, write about, paint about their experiences. So this can be really fun, really non-threatening, and certainly will yield good results. That's what I want to say to you. So with 5 minutes left and 8 different teaching approach theories under our belts, it's time, Serish, for a poll. Last one, I might add, last one. So here, if you could use only one of the 8 teaching theories we've looked at briefly in the last 20 minutes or so, which one would you use? And here they're listed. Remember, differentiated instruction, lecture-based instruction, technology-based, group instruction or individual instruction, inquiry-based, kinesthetic, or experiential. If you could only use one, which one would you choose? And I have no expectation. I don't know. Although I know what I would choose. So Serish, we'll see.
I think mine would be a couple of these. Like,
well, I know that's why I made it deliberately hard.
I know, but this one is
what
you
do
have
you
to pick one, really.
Yes, yes, you do. You do.
I do have a favorite.
Yes. Oh, do you? Do you want to say what your favorite
No,
is?
no, I'm going to tell you once I end the poll.
I have a favorite too. Oh, no, I do. For sure.
So we have 1,000 or over 1,100 people. I'm going to give this a 10 seconds because you might need to think over this, right? Hitting 1,400 shortly. Okay, I'm ending the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the results are with you. My favorite, Rachel, would have been differentiated instruction.
Okay. Okay. And that's, again, super interesting that there is, I mean, it's quite a clear lead in terms of 35%, and the next one is 23%. That's a significant lead for technology-based instruction. That's very, very interesting for me to see that. Yeah, I wouldn't have predicted it. I personally love experiential instruction. I used to, when I taught in Greece, which I did for many years, I would often take my students on the beach, go for a walk, look for things, talk about what we could find, describe the weather. So, I mean, there's just so much you can do. So, yeah.
Which one would that be, Rachel?
That would be experiential. Experiential, the bottom one, like it's like a little field trip. We'd go to the beach or somewhere, but we would only be allowed to talk in English, which is easy for me. So yeah. Okay, look, where are we? I have 2 more slides I would like to share, and they are just some tips, reminders, but I want to.
Rachel, I have a question for you, and this is very off topic, by the way, but I saw this in the Q&A box and I wanted to bring this up.
Okay.
Yeah. It's again very off topic, by the way. It's not professional development, but I still thought it would be useful. So someone said, I wanted to ask you about the all sorts Cha-Cha, Hob, Fizz in TopGoal book. What are they? What do they indicate? My students ask me if they are animals or virus.
No, neither. So I don't know if that person was at the session yesterday, but they are our mascots. They are little non-categorizable characters. They are neither virus nor human. They are our mascots that we created that are unique.
And because this question came in yesterday, Rachel, and I'm relating to it, some people ask, what is a mascot?
A mascot is like
a character, can you say?
Yes, you can. Yes, yes. It has a specific purpose, and it's there to indicate, it's associated with a specific brand, let's say. a mascot. So it's a symbol, a sign. Actually, in the Olympics recently, there were mascots from various companies and little characters or teddy bears or whatever that were associated with that particular company.
And they all have their individual personalities, right?
Have individual personalities that do become evident. AJ, the long purple one, no matter what's happening, he's going to ask if there's any food because he'll be hungry. The green triangle one called Bud is always frightened. It doesn't matter what it is. If we're going for a walk in the park, there'll be something he'll be frightened of. And Cha-Cha, the little lilac one, likes to tell stories, so she's the mascot for the stories. Look at the slides for yesterday. There are a couple of slides about why they're there, and how you as teachers can utilize them. And actually, it's an important opportunity that you really can make something of in the classrooms. We need to stop. It's 1 minute past, and I really wanted to finish on time. Tips for using, if I may, different teaching methods. Make sure you allow the time to plan, obviously. Consult with your colleagues, get their ideas, share your ideas on different approaches. Check your plans to ensure they're likely to be successful. Involve students and parents as and when appropriate. Be adaptable if you're going to try a new method, and tell the students what you're doing. If you're going to try experiential learning today, tell the students. Create some basic lesson routines in the classroom that remain stable, because as much as learners like excitement, they like stability and regularity and predictability too. So make sure your fundamental basic routines are still in place and that learners know what to expect and don't need to stress. Teach the topic, the same topic in 3 different ways. See which one works best. Just play around with it, be flexible. And the very last few words. Teaching methods or approaches are techniques that we can use to facilitate the process and to help our learners feel engaged and interested. So do vary it up. Do try different approaches, but also be aware of the approaches that you do use, and sometimes ask yourselves why, just as a reminder, just as a refresher, to make sure that you are using the most appropriate teaching approach for your specific class group and for the lesson learning outcomes. Do test out different learning approaches, as I say, using the same lesson in different ways, discuss them with other teachers, get different perspectives, and remain flexible. And that, Suresh, is all I can say today. And
Thank you. Wonderful session, Rachel. It was indeed like a professional development, I would say. Just things that you can apply in your class, strategies that you can use, methodologies. Clearly, this was enlightening. I mean, this is great for teachers. Thank you so much. I see someone saying useful meeting. Thank you so much. They're very welcome. And I was just checking in if I've helped, if I've missed out anything.
So we'll share the deck, that deck.
Yes.
We'll share the poll results.
I mean, we'll not be sharing the poll results. We will be sharing the deck, the recording, and the certificate if you have joined from the link that is in your email.
I'd like the poll results if possible.
You'd like the poll results, of course. I'll send that over. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This has been great. And I'm sorry we can't take all the questions, which is a shame, but we're only short of time. And, we're like 3:04 now. So we'll have to let you guys go. I know you've got other things, other important things to get done. So thanks a lot for joining us today. Thank you so much. I have a request. When you end this meeting, you will be directed to a survey, let's say. And these surveys help us get, understand better for future sessions, what you like, what you don't like, how we can do better next time. Was the time all right, let's say? Should we give more duration to this? So it would really help us if you answer that for us. So once we end we will be also sending you this survey on email, so you will have that. But just for now, because you've attended 2 sessions with us yesterday and today, when I end the meeting, you will have the option to give us your feedback. And feedback is great. Feedback is important. So make sure you get us the feedback and let us know what you think about the training session so we can improve on future trainings. Thank you for joining us. Have a lovely day. Thank you,
everybody.
Rachel.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. It was absolutely great to spend time with you. Take care. All the
Take
best.
care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.